I didn't ask for much for my wedding. No ballroom, no orchestra, no 7-tier cake. I picked a quiet morning ceremony because I had exactly 48 hours of leave, and the Army doesn't pause operations just because you fall in love. The chapel was small, clean, neutral, the kind of place that exists for people who want something official, not theatrical. I like that. It fit my life. It fit the way I make decisions, quick, deliberate, no extra noise. I arrived early out of habit. Years of formations and briefings do that to you. If something starts at 10, I'm there at 9:30, standing still scanning the room clock already running in my head. My dress was simple. Ivory, no train, no drama. I could sit, stand, move without worrying about stepping on myself. The kind of dress you choose when you're not trying to impress anyone. I checked my phone once, auto new messages. That wasn't unusual. My family was never early. My mother liked to arrive exactly on time so people would notice her. My sister liked to arrive late so people would wait. I took a breath and adjusted my ring. My fiancé, now husband, technically just not yet on paper, stood beside me, calm in the way only someone marrying into my family could be. He knew the stories. He knew the history. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. At 10 o'clock, the chapel doors were still closed. At 10:05, the officiant cleared his throat and looked at me polite but uncertain. I gave a small nod. We had time. At 10:10, the first row was still empty. At 10:15, I checked my phone again. Nothing. No apology text. No excuse. No dramatic "we're on our way." Just silence. I scanned the benches without meaning to. Front row empty. Second row empty. Third row empty. Every seat my family was supposed to fill looked untouched, like the room itself knew something had gone wrong and decided not to comment on it. I didn't feel sad. Not yet. Mostly I felt alert. That switch flipped automatically. When something doesn't go according to plan, you don't panic. You assess. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe someone got sick. Maybe my mother decided to test me again with one of her last-minute power plays. I waited. 10:20. The officiant leaned in slightly and whispered, "Do you want to give it a few more minutes?" I shook my head once. Clean, decisive. "No," I said. "We're starting." My husband squeezed my hand. Not tight. Just enough to remind me he was there. The ceremony took less than 15 minutes. No music, no readings, just vows spoken clearly and signatures written carefully. When I said "I do," I meant it. When he said it back, I didn't wonder if anyone was watching. By the time it was over, I had officially done something my family always claimed to support, but never really planned for me to complete without them. We stepped outside into the late morning light. A few strangers offered polite smiles. One older woman said congratulations. Another asked if we wanted photos. I thanked her and declined. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. That's when it hit, not emotionally but logically. They didn't forget. Forgetting is messy. Forgetting comes with apologies. Forgetting comes with panic texts and missed calls and excuses stacked on top of each other. This was clean. This was intentional. I didn't ask my husband what he thought. I didn't need his analysis. I already had enough data points to draw a conclusion. I slid my phone into my bag and walked toward the car. That's when it buzzed. Not a call. A notification. Social media. I stopped walking. The preview image loaded before I could think better of it. Crystal lights. Champagne flutes. A wide room filled with people dressed like they had somewhere important to be. I opened it. Live video. My sister. She stood at the center of a hotel ballroom, smiling like nothing in the world had ever disappointed her. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup flawless. She held a microphone with the confidence of someone who had practiced in front of mirrors her entire life. The camera panned across the room. I recognized everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends who had RSVP'd to my wedding months ago. My parents sat near the front, relaxed, pleased, exactly where they liked to be when an audience was involved. The caption read, "She said yes. Engagement party. Same day." Later technically, but not by accident. My sister lifted her chin as she laughed, and that's when I saw it. At first my brain refused to label it. Just color. Just light. Just something familiar in the wrong place. Then recognition snapped in sharp and immediate. The necklace. Deep blue stone. Oval cut. Framed in a thin halo of diamonds. hanging from a chain I had held in my own hands exactly once under very specific circumstances. My grandmother's necklace, the one locked away, the one discussed in quiet voices, the one tied to a will with conditions so precise, my sister used to roll her eyes whenever it came up. I didn't zoom in. I didn't need to. I knew that piece the way you know the weight of your service weapon without looking down. The video kept playing. My mother clapped. My sister laughed. Someone made a toast about family and tradition and starting new chapters. I closed the app. My husband watched my face carefully, but didn't interrupt. He had learned quickly that when I go quiet like that, I'm not spiraling. I'm organizing. We got into the car. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't raise my voice. I stared straight ahead and let one thought settle clear and heavy. They didn't just skip my wedding. They took something that was never theirs to touch. I started the engine and pulled into traffic. Already running timelines in my head. Already discarding excuses that wouldn't hold up, already moving past the question of why. Because why didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that a line had been crossed in public on camera, with witnesses who thought they were celebrating something harmless. The light turned green. I drove. I kept my hands steady on the steering wheel as the car merged onto the highway, the turn signal clicking off like it always does when a decision has already been made. Traffic moved at a normal pace, which felt almost offensive given what I'd just seen. No sirens, no chaos. Just people heading to brunch, unaware that my family had staged a quiet coup without bothering to inform the person they cut out. My husband glanced at me once, then looked back at the road. He knew better than to ask questions while my brain was still sorting facts from noise. I don't talk while I'm calculating. The hotel hosting my sister's engagement party was less than 20 minutes away. I didn't suggest going there. He didn't suggest not going. The car simply kept moving in that direction like the GPS had made the call for us. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. This time it was a group chat I hadn't muted yet. Family thread. The same one where my wedding date had been discussed. Confirmed, reconfirmed, and acknowledged with those useless little thumbs-up reactions. Someone had sent a photo. I didn't open it immediately. I already knew what it would show. My sister liked wide shots. Lots of people. Lots of smiles. Plenty of proof that she was the center of gravity. I opened it anyway. There they were. All of them. Standing together like this was exactly where they were always supposed to be. My mother in the middle hand on my sister's arm, smiling, with the practiced ease of someone who believes she's done nothing wrong. My father off to the side, holding a drink, looking relaxed in a way he never managed at my graduations or promotion ceremonies. The caption read, "So proud of our girl." Not girls, singular, very deliberate. I locked the phone and placed it face down in the cup holder. The urge to laugh came out of nowhere, short and sharp, and surprised both of us. So my husband said carefully, "That answers that." "Yes," I said. "It does." He waited. I didn't elaborate. There was nothing to add. The evidence was already stacked neatly in front of me. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This wasn't bad timing or confusion or someone getting sick at the last minute. They hadn't drifted into my sister's party by accident. They chose. And they chose early enough to get dressed, drive across town, and pose for photos. I replayed the last few weeks in my head with a new filter. The delayed replies. The vague answers. My mother's insistence that we keep the ceremony low-key. My sister asking too many questions about the timing, the location, whether there would be any big announcements. It lined up now. I thought about the way my grandmother used to describe decisions like this. She didn't talk about loyalty or love. She talked about patterns. People show you who they are when there's something to gain, she used to say. All you have to do is watch who they stand next to when the room gets crowded. The car slowed as traffic thickened near the hotel exit. I could already see the building rising above the trees, all glass and polished stone. Ballet stand full. Guests spilling out onto the sidewalk, laughing, holding phones up for pictures. I felt oddly calm. My husband pulled into a parking garage across the street and shut off the engine. For a moment, neither of us moved. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "We can go home. We can ignore this." "I know," I said, "but I'm not ignoring it." I stepped out of the car and adjusted my jacket. I was still wearing what I'd worn to the ceremony. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just clean lines and neutral colors. The kind of outfit that disappears in a crowd if you want it to. The lobby was loud. Music thumped faintly from the ballroom upstairs. A sign near the elevator congratulated my sister by name in looping gold letters. Someone had spent real money on that banner. The doors opened on the third floor and the noise doubled. Laughter. Clinking glasses. The sound of people congratulating themselves for being exactly where they wanted to be. I scanned the room once automatically. Exits, corners, cameras. Old habits don't turn off just because you're not in uniform. My sister stood near the center, surrounded by people, her head tilted just enough to catch the light. She looked confident, energized, untouchable. She spotted me before I reached the edge of the crowd. The change in her expression was subtle, but I caught it. A brief tightening around the eyes. Surprise followed immediately by something sharper. Annoyance. She leaned toward my mother and said something. My mother turned, saw me, and froze. Not shocked, not confused. Cornered. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't rush forward demanding explanations like a person who still expected honesty. I walked. People stepped aside as I passed, not because they recognized me, but because confidence reads as authority in any room. Years of briefings had taught me that. You don't need an introduction if you move like you belong there. My sister recovered quickly. She always did. By the time I reached her, she was smiling again, wide and performative. Well, she said, glancing pointedly at my hands. This is unexpected. So was this, I said, looking around the room. A few people laughed, unsure if they were supposed to. My mother cleared her throat. We thought you'd be busy, she said. With the ceremony and all. It's over, I replied. It didn't take long. That was true. And it landed exactly how I intended. My sister laughed again, louder this time. See, that's why we planned this later in the day. We didn't want things to overlap. I looked at her neck. She noticed. Of course she did. She reached up instinctively, fingers brushing the chain, and her smile sharpened. A challenge. A dare. Oh, she said lightly. Do you like it? I didn't answer right away. I let my eyes stay on the necklace just long enough for the silence to stretch. People were watching now. Not openly, not obviously, but enough. I recognize it, I said. That's all. My sister's eyes flicked to my mother, then back to me. You should, she replied. It's family. My husband stepped closer behind me. I felt the solid presence of him without turning around. I nodded once, slow, controlled. Yes, I said, it is. The music swelled behind us as someone raised a glass for another toast. My sister lifted her chin, the blue stone catching the light again, and smiled like a person who believed the room was still hers. I stayed where I was, feeling the hum of the crowd, the weight of that necklace in my line of sight, and the certainty settling in that this wasn't about hurt feelings or favoritism anymore. This was about possession. And possession has rules. I shifted my weight slightly, just enough to get a clearer angle, and the light caught the stone again. There was no mistaking it now. The sapphire wasn't a look-alike, not a rental, not something inspired by the original. It had the same deep blue core that darkened toward the center, the same tiny inclusion near the edge that my grandmother used to point out with her fingernail whenever she told the story. That little flaw, she'd say, tapping the glass of the display case, is how you know it's real. I had been 19 the first time she showed it to me. She didn't make a ceremony out of it. No speeches, no dramatic reveal. She unlocked the safe, lifted the velvet box, and placed it between us on the kitchen table like she was setting down a set of keys. This isn't jewelry, she told me. It's paperwork you can wear. That was how she thought. Contracts, conditions, clear terms. She explained the will the same way she explained everything else, slowly, precisely, and without room for interpretation. The necklace was tied to a single condition. It wouldn't pass automatically. It wouldn't be split. It would belong to the first granddaughter who married legally. No engagement, no promise, no ceremony for show. Marriage. She had made sure a lawyer wrote it that way. I looked back at my sister, still smiling, still performing the sapphire resting exactly where my grandmother used to wear it when she dressed up for dinner downtown. My sister hadn't even bothered to change the chain. That detail annoyed me more than it should have. You look distracted, my sister said, her tone sweet enough to sound harmless to anyone who didn't know her. I'm just remembering something, I replied. My mother stepped in quickly. This isn't the time, she said. We're celebrating. I glanced at her hand resting on my sister's arm, fingers tight. She knew. Of course she did. She always knew exactly how far things had gone before pretending not to notice. I didn't realize the necklace was out of the safe, I said. I kept my voice conversational, like I was asking about the weather. My sister shrugged. Grandma wanted me to have it. That was the line. The one she'd practiced. The one she expected to work. I waited for the usual surge of anger. It didn't come. Instead, my mind flipped to inventory mode. Claims versus records. Statements versus facts. She was very clear, I said. About when? My sister's smile tightened. You always loved rules, she said. Some of us live in the real world. That got a few polite chuckles from nearby guests who had no idea what game they were watching. I nodded, accepting the response, the way you accept a bad answer on a test you already know how to grade. My husband leaned closer. Do you want to leave? He asked quietly. Not yet, I said. Across the room, a waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes. My sister took one, careful not to jostle the necklace, and raised it slightly. To family, she said, loud enough to draw attention. And to new beginnings. Glasses lifted. Applause followed. The room moved on, satisfied that whatever tension had existed was now resolved by a toast. I didn't drink. I watched the chain shift against her collarbone as she laughed, watched the clasp catch for a split second before settling again. I knew that clasp. I knew how stiff it felt when it hadn't been worn in a while, which meant it had been taken recently. I stepped back, letting the crowd close in between us. My mother exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. My sister turned away, already distracted by congratulations and cameras. My husband and I moved toward the edge of the room. The music grew louder as we put distance between ourselves and the center. That wasn't subtle, he said. It didn't need to be, I replied. We found a quiet spot near a column just far enough from the speakers to hear ourselves think. I pulled my phone out again, not to scroll, but to check the date and time on the wedding license photo still open in my gallery. Signed. Stamped. Valid as of that morning. Marriage. Condition met. I thought about the safe deposit box. The bank branch my grandmother used. The layered access rules she'd insisted on, even when the teller rolled her eyes. 2 names. 2 signatures. No exceptions. I had never added my sister's name, which meant someone else had. Are you okay? My husband asked. Yes, I said. I'm just doing math. He smiled faintly. He'd heard that before. I watched my sister from across the room, watched her tilt her head just so for another picture, watched the sapphire flash again. She was enjoying this. Not just the party. The fact that she'd pulled it off. That she'd taken something she knew mattered and dared anyone to challenge her in public. She assumed I wouldn't. She assumed I'd stay quiet to keep things polite. To avoid making a scene. To preserve whatever version of family harmony she thought still existed. I slid my phone back into my bag and straightened my jacket. This necklace, I said quietly, more to myself than to anyone else, isn't a symbol. My husband raised an eyebrow. It's evidence, I continued. We didn't approach her again. We didn't confront my parents. We didn't argue with relatives who had already chosen a side. We left the room the same way we'd entered it. Calm, unremarkable, unnoticed by anyone who wasn't paying attention. In the elevator, the silence felt different. Not heavy. Focused. What are you going to do? My husband asked. I watched the floor numbers descend, listening to the faint music above us fade with each level. I'm not going to ask for it back, I said. And I'm not going to argue about intentions. The doors opened onto the quiet lobby. Outside, the evening air felt cooler than it should have for the season. I'm just going to document what already happened, I added, stepping forward. And let everything else follow naturally. We crossed the lobby toward the exit. Behind us, the party continued uninterrupted. Laughter, music, toasts. My sister still wore the necklace, and that meant the timeline was already running. I didn't say a word until the car doors closed and the city noise dropped behind the glass. My fingers were already moving, pulling my phone back out, unlocking it with muscle memory that came from years of secure logins and time-sensitive reports. Emotion stayed where it belonged, off the clock. I opened my notes app and started a list. Time of wedding license signature. Time I saw the live stream. Timestamp on the engagement photos. Location of the hotel. Location of the bank branch my grandmother used. I didn't label the list. I didn't need to. My brain knew what it was. My husband drove without asking questions, letting me work. The dashboard clock glowed softly. Every minute mattered now, not because I was in a rush, but because clarity improves when details are fresh. At the first red light, I added another line. Witnesses. There were plenty. Too many, actually. Guests, photos, video. Social media posts helpfully tagged with dates and locations by people who thought they were celebrating something harmless. I exhaled slowly and rolled my shoulders, once loosening tension I hadn't realized was there. This wasn't a family argument anymore. It had crossed into a category I understood far better. "You're in work mode," my husband said. "Yes," I replied. Daughter mode clocked out. He smiled faintly. I figured. We pulled into our driveway and went inside. I didn't change clothes. I didn't sit down. I placed my bag on the table and pulled out the folder I'd prepared weeks earlier, the one with copies of the will, the trust summary, and the inventory list my grandmother's lawyer had provided when the estate was finalized. I spread everything out under the kitchen light. There it was in black and white. The necklace listed by description, appraised value, storage location, and conditions of transfer. No ambiguity, no wiggle room. The language was so tight it almost felt personal. I snapped photos of the pages, then opened the bank's app. The safe deposit box records weren't accessible online, but the branch information was. Same location, same box number. I checked the date my grandmother passed again. I checked the date the box was last accessed. My stomach tightened, not with anger but with confirmation. The access log showed a recent entry. 2 days before my wedding. I closed the app and set the phone down carefully, like it might crack if I moved too fast. "Okay," I said out loud. My husband leaned against the counter. "That's not great for them." "No," I agreed. "It's not." I picked the phone back up and called the bank branch directly. Not the customer service line. The branch. I asked for the manager by name. My grandmother always insisted on that. When he came on the line, I introduced myself, clearly gave my full name, and stated my relationship to the account. I didn't accuse. I didn't speculate. I asked one question. "Who accessed the safe deposit box on this date?" There was a pause. Papers rustled. He gave me a name, my mother. I thanked him and ended the call. That was enough to shift this from suspicion to fact. My mother had access. My sister did not, which meant the necklace hadn't been borrowed. It had been removed by someone who knew exactly how the rules worked and chose to ignore them. I took a breath and opened my laptop. Filing a report isn't dramatic. It's boring, structured, predictable. You answer questions. You upload documents. You select boxes from drop-down menus that don't care how complicated your family dynamics are. Property taken without authorization. Known location of item. Evidence available. I attached screenshots. I attached photos. I attached a copy of the will. My husband watched quietly. "Are you sure?" he asked, not doubting me, just checking. "Yes," I said, "because if I don't do this now, I'm agreeing that rules only matter when they benefit everyone else." I hit submit. The confirmation number appeared instantly. I didn't feel relief. I felt alignment. Like something that had been slightly off kilter for years had finally clicked back into place. I closed the laptop and stood up straight. "Do you want to call them?" my husband asked. "No," I said. "They already know what they did." I went to the bedroom and finally changed clothes. Not because I was tired, but because the uniform of the day had done its job. I put on jeans and a plain shirt, pulled my hair back and checked my reflection briefly. I didn't look upset. I looked focused. When I came back into the kitchen, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Why did you leave so early?" People were asking. I stared at it for a moment, then placed the phone face down on the table. Another buzz. This time from my sister. "Don't be weird about the necklace. Grandma wanted me to enjoy it." I let out a short breath through my nose. Enjoy. That word did more work than she realized. I picked the phone back up and typed a single response. Noted. I didn't add punctuation. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. My husband watched me carefully. "That's it." "That's it," I said. The evening settled around us. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. Life continued, blissfully unaware that a quiet line had been crossed. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, feeling the cool surface against my back. "You know they're going to react," my husband said. "Yes," I replied. and they're going to do it badly. I thought about my sister's smile when she noticed me looking at the necklace. The way she'd touched it like a challenge. The confidence that came from years of being protected from consequences by people who confused love with cover. I finished the water and set the glass down. I'm not going after her, I said. I'm letting the situation speak for itself. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail notification. From my mother. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I opened my calendar and checked the next day's schedule. No meetings. No briefings. Nothing I couldn't move if I needed to. I closed the app and looked at my husband. We might need to go back to that hotel, I said, my tone casual, like I was suggesting groceries. He nodded. I thought so. Not to confront anyone, I added. Just to be present. The house was quiet again. The documents were stacked neatly. The report was filed. The necklace was still around my sister's neck, catching light in a room full of people who thought they were celebrating something joyful. And somewhere between the bank's access log and the confirmation number on my screen, the last remaining illusion I had about my role in this family finally dropped away. The valet barely looked up when I handed him the keys, which told me everything I needed to know about how the night was going. Loud rooms make people sloppy. They stop paying attention to details because they assume nothing important is happening outside the spotlight. Inside, the elevator chimed and opened onto the same third-floor hallway. Same music, same laughter, same illusion that nothing had shifted. I stepped out and adjusted my jacket once, not for appearance, but to settle my shoulders. My husband stayed half a step behind me. Not protective, just present. The way someone stands when they trust you to lead. The ballroom doors were open this time. No dramatic entrance. No pause. I walked straight in like I belonged there, which technically I did. I'd been invited. I just hadn't been chosen. My sister was still at the center of the room, holding court like a politician on election night. Her fiancé stood close arm around her waist, smiling the distracted smile of someone who assumed everything was handled for him. The necklace was still there. That detail mattered. It meant no one had warned her. No one had rushed her into a side room to take it off. No frantic whispering yet. Good. I crossed the room without hesitation. Conversations slowed as I passed. A few faces registered recognition. Others registered confusion. The kind that comes when the script changes and no one handed out revisions. My sister noticed me again faster this time. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes hardened. Back already, she said lightly. I thought you had somewhere else to be. I do, I replied. I just needed to stop by. Her fiancé turned to me. Up close, he looked polite, well-groomed, and vaguely curious in the way people get when they sense tension, but haven't been told why. He extended his hand. I'm Daniel, he said. You must be Alyssa, I said, shaking his hand once, firm, neutral, her sister. His eyes flicked between us. She didn't mention. No, my sister cut in quickly. Because today's been a lot. I looked at her, then back at him. I'm sure. My mother appeared at my elbow faster than before. She smiled too brightly. Alyssa. This isn't appropriate, she murmured. We'll talk later. There's nothing to talk about, I said. I'm just here to clear something up. My sister laughed a sharp sound. You're being dramatic. I'm being accurate, I replied. I turned my attention back to Daniel. How familiar are you with the necklace she's wearing? His brow furrowed slightly. It's a family heirloom, he said. From her grandmother. That part is true, I said. The rest is conditional. The room didn't go silent, but the people closest to us stopped pretending not to listen. Someone lowered their phone. Someone else stopped mid-sip. My sister shifted her weight, seriously. Yes, I said. Now is fine. My mother's hand closed around my arm. You're embarrassing yourself, she whispered. I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. Let go. She didn't. I gently removed her fingers one by one and stepped forward. Daniel, I said, keeping my voice even, that necklace was secured in a safe deposit box under very specific conditions. Those conditions were not met when it was removed. He glanced at my sister. What does that mean? It means, my sister said quickly, that Alyssa is upset because Grandma liked rules, and she thinks everything is about paperwork. I nodded. It is about paperwork. That's exactly what it's about. I pulled my phone from my bag. Not dramatically, not held up like a threat. Just present. I'm not asking for it back, I continued. I'm informing you that it's been reported as taken without authorization. My sister's smile finally cracked. You wouldn't. I already did, I said. The words landed softly. That was intentional. I didn't need volume. I needed clarity. Daniel looked at me, then at her. Is that true? My sister scoffed. She's bluffing. I'm not, I said. There's a record. Time stamps. Access logs. My mother stepped forward, her voice tight. This is a misunderstanding. No, I replied. It's a choice. A murmur rippled outward. Not panic. Curiosity. The dangerous kind. Daniel's grip loosened slightly around my sister's waist. Why wouldn't you tell me this? He asked her. Because it doesn't matter, she snapped. It's just a necklace. I tilted my head. Then taking it off shouldn't be a problem. Silence. She didn't move. That was all the confirmation anyone needed. I slid my phone back into my bag. I'm not here to argue, I said. I've said what I came to say. My sister stared at me like I'd just kicked over something fragile. You think you've won something? I think I replied that actions tend to explain themselves. I stepped back, creating space again. My husband met my eyes and nodded once. Behind us, the music resumed at a slightly lower volume. People pretended to go back to their conversations, but their bodies angled inward, listening for whatever came next. Daniel looked down at the necklace, then back at my sister. Maybe we should talk privately. Her eyes flashed. No, we're not doing this here. That's exactly where we're doing it, he said quietly. I turned toward the exit, not waiting to hear the rest. I didn't need their argument. I'd already done my part. As we crossed the room, my phone vibrated. A new message. Unknown number. Is this Alyssa Grant? This is Officer Reynolds with the property desk. We received your report. I didn't open it yet. The doors closed behind us, muting the music and the voices, and the hallway felt cooler, calmer, like a place where things could be said without an audience. My husband glanced at me. That went differently. Yes, I said. It did. I pressed the elevator button and waited, feeling the faint buzz of the phone in my hand, aware of the weight shifting not emotionally, but structurally. Inside that ballroom, people were still clinking glasses and pretending the night was intact. But the story they thought they were celebrating had already started to change shape. The elevator doors slid shut, with a soft click, sealing off the noise from upstairs, and I finally opened the message on my phone. The officer's text was short, professional, and exactly what I expected. He confirmed receipt, asked for clarification on the item's current location, and noted that the report had been logged under my name. I replied with the hotel address and added one line item, currently worn publicly at a private event. That was enough. The elevator stopped at the lobby, and we stepped out into a quieter space where no one was pretending not to listen. My husband glanced at my screen, then back at me. You just turned a party into a paper trail, he said. Yes, I replied, and paper trails don't care about feelings. We crossed the lobby and exited into the night. The valet stand was busy now, guests arriving late, unaware they were walking into a situation that had already shifted under their feet. I didn't rush. Rushing looks like guilt. Calm looks like confidence. We waited near the entrance instead of leaving. That was a choice, a deliberate one. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother calling. I let it ring. She tried again. Then a text. Answer your phone. You've made your point. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up the live stream replay my sister's friend had already posted publicly. The video quality wasn't great, but it didn't need to be. The necklace was visible, clear, unmistakable. The timestamp sat neatly in the corner. Evidence doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. Inside the ballroom, raised voices cut through the music. Not loud enough for drama, but sharp enough to suggest a disagreement that wasn't part of the program. A few guests drifted toward the hallway, pretending to take calls, pretending not to eavesdrop. Daniel stepped out first. He spotted me almost immediately. His expression had changed. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by something tighter. Concern mixed with calculation. We need to talk, he said. I'm listening, I replied. He glanced back toward the ballroom doors. Is this going to become a bigger issue? That depends, I said, on how long the necklace stays where it is. My sister appeared behind him, face flushed, jaw set. She didn't look at me. She looked at him. She's overreacting, she said. This is a family thing. He didn't answer her. He looked at me instead. You really filed something. Yes, I said. I documented a removal from a secured location without authorization. That sounds serious, he said. It is, I replied. My sister laughed, but it came out brittle. You're not actually going to do anything. I met her eyes. I already did. Silence stretched again. Not theatrical, just heavy. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Why didn't you just ask for it back? Because asking implies a choice, I said. There wasn't one. My mother burst through the doors next, her composure cracking. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're humiliating your sister. No, I said. She's doing that herself. Daniel stepped slightly away from my sister just enough to register. I need to understand what I'm standing next to, he said quietly. My sister turned on him. You're taking her side now. I'm taking facts seriously, he replied. I didn't add anything. I didn't need to. The situation was doing the work for me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Officer Reynolds, I answered. Yes, I said. His voice was calm, efficient. He asked me to confirm the description again and verify that I was willing to proceed if the item wasn't returned voluntarily. I am, I said. Daniel watched my face as I spoke, his expression shifting with every word he caught. I understand, I continued. Yes, I'm on site. No, there's no immediate risk. Thank you. I ended the call. Daniel exhaled slowly. They're actually involved, he said. Yes, I replied. My sister's confidence finally collapsed into panic. You called the police? I contacted the property desk, I said. They contacted me. My mother stepped forward, lowering her voice. You don't have to do this. I do, I replied. Because if I don't, I'm agreeing that this behavior is acceptable. Daniel looked between us again. I think he said carefully that the necklace should come off. Right now. My sister shook her head. No, this is mine. Daniel's jaw tightened. It doesn't sound like it is. She reached for the clasp defensively. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing not to be complicit, he said. That word landed harder than anything I'd said all night. A few guests hovered nearby now, openly watching. Someone whispered. Someone else lifted their phone and then lowered it again, unsure. My sister looked at me, eyes blazing. You planned this. No, I replied. I responded to it. She turned away from me and yanked the necklace off, shoving it into my mother's hands, happy. My mother stared at it like it might burn her. Hold on to it, Daniel said. Until this is sorted. I nodded once. That's acceptable. My phone buzzed again. A confirmation message from the officer, if the item is secured, and no longer worn, document location and holder. I typed back removed. Currently held by third party. I slid the phone away. Daniel looked exhausted. This isn't how tonight was supposed to go. No, I said, but this is how it went. My husband stepped closer, resting a hand lightly against my back. Not protective. Anchoring. We're leaving, Daniel said to my sister. Now. She stared at him like she didn't recognize him. You can't be serious. I am, he replied. And we'll talk about everything else later. They walked toward the exit, my mother following, clutching the necklace like a liability she'd finally realized had weight. I stayed where I was, watching them go, noting who looked back and who didn't. The party behind us struggled back to life. Music resumed. Laughter attempted to reassert itself. But something had shifted. People had seen enough to know the night wasn't what it pretended to be. My phone vibrated once more. A new message from the officer confirming next steps. I read it, nodded to myself, and slipped the phone into my pocket. Outside traffic moved steadily past the hotel entrance headlights, sweeping across the pavement in predictable patterns. Life continued indifferent to family drama and diamond necklaces. I took a breath, feeling the air fill my lungs evenly, and turned toward my husband. Let's go, I said. We walked toward the car, leaving behind a celebration that had quietly transformed into documentation, aware that from this point forward, every word and every move would carry a different weight. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and watched the screen light up again, this time with a notification that had nothing to do with the necklace. It was from my credit monitoring service, the one I'd kept active ever since my first security clearance review. A soft alert. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me stop walking. I opened it. Recent activity. Inquiry flagged. Not fraudulent yet. Just unfamiliar. I didn't say anything right away. I pulled out a chair and sat down, resting my elbows on the table, letting the information settle into place. My husband watched me from across the room, reading my posture the way he always did. That look means something just clicked, he said. Yes, I replied. And I don't like what it connects to. I opened the full report. There it was. a credit inquiry tied to a loan application I hadn't submitted. The amount wasn't massive, but the timing was wrong. Very wrong. I scrolled. Another account. Older. Closed, but not clean. A line of credit opened years ago under my name, paid inconsistently, then quietly resolved without my involvement. I leaned back in the chair. "This isn't new," I said. "It's just finally visible." My husband frowned. "You didn't know about this?" "No," I said. "But I should have." I pulled up my old records, tax returns, bank statements, everything I kept meticulously organized, because the military demands it. The discrepancies weren't obvious at first. They were buried in patterns. Small transfers. Payments just under reporting thresholds. Timing that coincided with deployments, training, rotations periods when I was unavailable and unreachable. I didn't feel angry. I felt stupid. Not for trusting them, but for assuming they'd never cross this particular line, using my name, my credit, my clean financial record. That was different. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. "I don't know what you think you're doing," her message read, "but you've gone too far." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new tab and ran my sister's name through a basic public record search. Nothing fancy, just what anyone with internet access and patience could find. The results loaded slowly. Unpaid balances, late notices, a civil claim I didn't recognize, another credit line tied back to the same address my parents used. I exhaled through my nose. She wasn't just careless, she was drowning. And instead of fixing it, they'd been bailing her out with buckets labeled with my name. "That's why they needed the necklace," my husband said quietly. "Yes," I replied, "and why they needed it quietly." I scrolled further. The pattern became clearer the longer I looked. My parents hadn't just enabled her. They'd structured their own finances around hiding the damage, moving money through accounts they assumed I'd never check, leveraging my reputation as the responsible one to smooth over gaps. Every time I'd been deployed, every time I'd been out of state, every time I'd trusted them to handle something temporary. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not in grief, in recalibration. "This affects my clearance," I said. My husband nodded. "Which means it affects your career." "Yes," I said. "Which means this stops now." I stood up and paced once across the kitchen, then stopped. The impulse to call them, to demand explanations, to hear their excuses rose up and passed just as quickly. That would be emotional, inefficient. Instead, I opened my laptop again. I pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. I flagged inconsistencies. I documented everything. Dates, amounts, addresses, connections. This wasn't about revenge, it was about insulation. I drafted a formal dispute for each account I didn't recognize, attaching documentation that showed I hadn't authorized the activity. I referenced deployment dates, training schedules, physical impossibilities. Facts don't argue. They just sit there until someone has to deal with them. My husband leaned against the counter. "You're not covering for them anymore." "No," I said. "I'm covering for myself." Another message came in, this time from my sister. "You really embarrassed us tonight." I stared at the words for a second, then typed back. "You embarrassed yourself long before tonight." She replied almost immediately. "You think you're better than us." I paused, considering the most accurate response. "I think I'm accountable," I typed. "There's a difference." I set the phone down. By the time I finished submitting the disputes, the kitchen clock read just past midnight. The house was quiet. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind something steadier. Clarity. My husband poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward me. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "the systems I've respected my whole life do what they're designed to do." I took a sip and opened my calendar again. I blocked out the next morning. I flagged a call with my legal assistance office. Not because I needed a lawyer yet, but because documentation matters when your livelihood depends on it. I also drafted an email to my unit's security officer. Not detailed. Just enough to establish transparency. I didn't hit send right away. I read it once more, adjusted a phrase, then sent it. There was a strange calm in that moment. The kind that comes when you stop carrying weight that was never yours to begin with. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail this time, from my father. I didn't listen to it either. Instead, I opened a new document and titled it simply Boundary. I listed what I would no longer do. No financial assistance, no shared accounts, no temporary favors, no silence in exchange for peace. I saved the file and closed the laptop. Outside, the streetlight flickered once and settled. Somewhere nearby, a car door slammed. Normal sounds. Normal life. Inside, the last thread, tying my sense of responsibility to their choices, finally snapped, not violently, not dramatically, but cleanly. I looked at my husband and felt a quiet certainty take hold. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be hidden anymore. My phone started buzzing before I finished my coffee the next morning, the vibration rattling against the countertop like it had something urgent to prove. I didn't pick it up right away. I watched it buzz itself quiet, then light up again, then quiet again. The pattern was familiar. Pressure disguised as concern. When I finally looked, there were 6 missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, 1 from an unknown number I didn't need to guess. I took a slow sip and let the caffeine do its job. The first voicemail was my mother's. Her voice was tight, clipped the way it got when she thought she was being reasonable under unfair circumstances. "We need to talk," she said. "You've made a very serious mistake." The second message came from my father. No greeting, no warmth. "You've crossed a line," he said. "Fix this before it gets worse." The third voicemail was my sister's. She was crying, but not convincingly. Too many pauses. Too much effort. "I don't know why you hate me so much," she said. "I thought we were family." I deleted all 3 without responding. By 9 a.m., the messages shifted from calls to texts. Shorter, sharper. "You're overreacting. This could affect your reputation. People are asking questions." That last one almost made me smile. Good. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and opened my laptop. My inbox was already filling with replies. The credit bureaus had acknowledged my disputes. My unit security officer confirmed receipt of my message and scheduled a routine follow-up. Routine. That word mattered. The backlash didn't stay private for long. It never does when a family has spent years controlling the narrative. By noon, I received a call from an aunt I hadn't spoken to in months. I let it go to voicemail. "Alyssa," she said, sighing dramatically, "your mother is beside herself. This is tearing the family apart." I deleted it too. Another message came in, this time from a cousin. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" I stared at the words for a moment, then typed back. Because letting it go would mean lying. No response after that. My husband watched all of this quietly from the other side of the room, pretending to read, but clearly paying attention. "They're trying to wear you down," he said. "Yes," I replied. "They always do." In the afternoon, my mother escalated. She showed up unannounced. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. The knock was too confident, too entitled. I opened it just enough to see her face. She looked tired but not regretful. "There's a difference." "This has gone far enough," she said, stepping forward like she expected me to move aside. I didn't. "You embarrassed your sister," she continued. "You embarrassed us." I leaned against the doorframe. "You did that yourselves," she scoffed. "You're being dramatic. No one is going to press charges over a necklace." "I didn't press charges," I said. "I documented a theft." Her eyes flicked just for a second. A tell. "That kind of language is dangerous," she snapped. "You could ruin her life." "She should have thought about that," I replied, "before she wore something she didn't own." My mother lowered her voice. "You think you're so righteous because you wear a uniform." I tilted my head. "No. I think I'm accountable because I understand consequences." She stared at me like I'd switched languages. "You've changed," she said. Yes, I agreed. "I stopped covering for you." That was when the anger broke through the performance. "You owe this family," she hissed. "Everything you have came from us." I laughed. Not loud. Just enough to slip out before I could stop it. "No," I said. "Everything I have came from my own work. You just took credit for it." Her face hardened. "If this continues," she said, "don't expect anyone to stand by you." I met her gaze evenly. They already didn't. She had no response to that. She turned and walked away, heels sharp against the concrete, already dialing her phone before she reached the driveway. The next wave hit online. Someone shared a vague post about family betrayal and selfish choices. No names, but enough hints to be obvious. Comments followed. Sympathy poured in for them. I didn't respond. I took screenshots. Facts don't fade. Posts do. That evening, my sister finally called directly. I answered this time mostly out of curiosity. "You did this on purpose," she said without greeting. "You wanted to humiliate me." "I wanted my name back," I replied. "You think Daniel hasn't noticed," she snapped. He's acting weird. He's asking questions. Good, I said. He should. She went quiet for a moment, then changed tactics. Fine, she said. What do you want? An apology money. I want you to stop using my identity, I replied. And I want the truth to stay the truth. That's not how family works, she said. That's exactly how accountability works, I replied. She hung up. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. The house felt smaller that night, not in a suffocating way, but in the way spaces do when they finally belong to you. No outside noise. No expectations. My husband handed me a folder he'd printed out while I was on the call. What's this? I asked. A timeline, he said, just in case they try to rewrite it. I flipped through the pages. Dates, screenshots, notes, clean, organized. I nodded. Good. Outside, the sun dropped behind the houses across the street. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Inside, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from my credit service. Update account dispute resolved. Responsibility removed. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked it and set the phone face down. The noise was getting louder. The pressure more obvious. The attempts less subtle. And the more they pushed, the clearer it became that the version of me they were reacting to, the quiet one, the accommodating one, no longer existed. The phone vibrated against the nightstand before my alarm went off, a low insistence that pulled me awake without urgency. I rolled onto my side, checked the screen, and sat up when I saw Daniel's name. I let it ring twice before answering. We need to talk, he said. His voice sounded flatter than it had at the party. Less confident. More careful. I'm listening, I replied. There was a pause, like he was choosing words he hadn't expected to need so soon. I spoke with a lawyer this morning. That was fast, I said. So was everything else, he replied. About the necklace, and the accounts, and the access logs. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood stretching once. What did you learn? That none of this is small, he said, and that if I don't take distance from it, it becomes my problem too. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That's usually how it works. He exhaled. She didn't tell me any of this. No, I said. She wouldn't. Another pause. This one heavier. I asked her directly if she'd used your name for anything. And I asked. She didn't answer, he said. She asked why I was taking your side. I'm not a side, I replied. I'm a fact. I know, he said quietly. That's what scares her. When the call ended, I set the phone down and walked into the kitchen. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds, clean and ordinary. I poured coffee and opened my laptop while it brewed, already seeing the notifications stack up. The first email was from the bank. Formal. Neutral. It confirmed that the necklace had been returned to a secure location pending resolution. No emotion. No commentary. The second email came from the credit bureau. Another account removed. Another correction logged. The third was from my unit's security office. The tone was calm, procedural, reassuring. Transparency appreciated. No adverse impact anticipated. I closed the laptop and took my coffee to the table. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere nearby, a lawn sprinkler clicked on. Life continued unimpressed by anyone's personal implosion. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my sister. I didn't answer. She followed up with a text. He left. I read it once, then set the phone face down. 5 minutes later, another message. He moved out this morning. I took a sip of coffee and stared out the window. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I felt exactly what I expected to feel when consequences finally catch up to people who assume they never will. Nothing dramatic, just quiet. By mid-morning, the fallout spread outward. A cousin texted asking if the rumors were true. An aunt sent a vague message about misunderstandings. Someone forwarded me a screenshot from social media where my sister had posted a long paragraph about betrayal stress and people who weaponize paperwork. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I forwarded relevant screenshots to a folder labeled documentation and went about my day. The call from my mother came just after lunch. I answered this one. Her voice sounded smaller than it had the day before. Less sharp. More brittle. They're asking questions, she said. Who is they? I asked. The bank, she said. And someone from Daniel's side. And she stopped herself. This has gone too far. I leaned back in my chair. You mean it's no longer contained? She ignored that. Your sister is devastated. I didn't devastate her, I replied. I stopped lying for her. She's your responsibility, my mother snapped. You always clean things up. Not anymore, I said. Silence stretched across the line. You're really gonna let this destroy us, she said. No, I replied. You did that yourselves. I just stopped holding the door shut. She hung up without saying goodbye. In the afternoon, I received confirmation that my disputes had been fully resolved. The wording was bland, almost disappointing given how much effort had gone into undoing the damage. Resolution complete. Responsibility reassigned. That was it. My husband came home early and found me sorting papers at the dining table. You look lighter, he said. I feel unburdened, I replied. He glanced at the stack. Anything else coming? Probably, I said. But nothing I can't document. That evening, Daniel texted once more. I'm sorry, he wrote, for not asking better questions sooner. I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, You asked when it mattered. I set the phone aside and stood stretching again, rolling tension out of my shoulders the way I did after long days. Outside, the sky darkened slowly. No storm. No sudden shift. Just the steady approach of night. I thought about my sister sitting somewhere surrounded by boxes, trying to figure out how a story she'd controlled for years had slipped out of her hands. I thought about my parents realizing that the person they'd relied on to absorb consequences had stepped away. I didn't feel responsible for any of it. The systems were working. The records were clear. The truth didn't need me to defend it anymore. I washed the last mug in the sink and set it on the rack. The sound of it settling into place felt final without being dramatic. My phone buzzed one more time. A notification from my calendar. Upcoming return to duty. I acknowledged it, closed the app, and turned off the kitchen light, moving through the house with the calm certainty that comes when the weight you've been carrying finally shifts where it belongs. The weight of my duffel settled against my shoulder as I walked across the parking lot. The fabric familiar enough that my body adjusted without thought. Early morning air carried that clean metallic chill that always shows up before sunrise, the kind that clears your head whether you ask it to or not. I tossed the bag into the trunk and closed it gently, not because I was being sentimental, but because I've learned that force is rarely necessary when things are already decided. The drive to base was quiet. No radio. No calls. Just the road and the steady hum of tires on asphalt. I merged into traffic and let muscle memory take over the same way I had hundreds of times before deployments, training rotations, temporary duty assignments. This wasn't an escape. It was a return. At the gate, I handed over my ID, exchanged a brief nod, and drove through without delay. Routine, predictable. The kind of order that never pretends to be emotional. I parked, stepped out, and paused for a moment, not to reflect but to orient. Buildings, walkways, flags moving slightly in the breeze, everything exactly where it was supposed to be. Inside, my office looked untouched. The chair was pushed in. The desk clear. The framed photo of my grandmother still sat in the corner, angled toward the window the way I'd left it months ago. I set my bag down and turned the chair just enough to catch the light differently. She smiled back at me from the frame, calm and unimpressed. You warned me, I said quietly. I logged into my system, reviewed the overnight messages, and started answering what needed answering. No one mentioned my wedding. No one mentioned my family. They asked about timelines. Deliverables, logistics. I gave them clean answers. By mid-morning, the noise from the outside world had thinned. Fewer texts, fewer attempts to pull me back into conversations that no longer involved me. One message came through from my sister. Not dramatic, not defensive, just short. I didn't think it would end like this. I read it once and didn't reply, because endings aren't something you negotiate after the fact. During lunch, I walked the perimeter path like I always did. Counting steps out of habit, letting the rhythm reset my thoughts. A few people waved. Someone asked how leave had been. Eventful, I said, and kept walking. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from my mother. Her voice was quieter this time. No anger. No accusations. We need time, she said. I hope you understand. I deleted it. Understanding isn't the same as agreeing to reopen a door. The rest of the day passed cleanly. Tasks completed. Conversations ended when they needed to end. When I shut down my computer and stood there was no lingering tension in my shoulders, no sense that I'd left something unresolved. On the drive home, traffic slowed near an intersection. A couple argued on the sidewalk. Someone laughed too loudly outside a cafe. Life moved in all directions at once. At a red light, I reached into the center console and pulled out the small velvet pouch I'd picked up from the bank earlier that week. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. The necklace rested there now, exactly where it belonged. Not as a trophy, not as proof, but as an object that had finally stopped being used as leverage. The light turned green. When I got home, my husband was already there, sleeves rolled up, something simmering on the stove. He glanced over his shoulder when I walked in. "Long day?" he asked. "Productive," I replied. He smiled. "That's a good sign." I set the pouch down in the safe we'd installed months earlier, locked it, and turned the dial without ceremony. The click felt final in the way only mechanical things can be. Over dinner, we talked about normal things. Work schedules, weekend plans, a movie we'd half-watched and never finished. No one mentioned my sister. No one mentioned my parents. Afterward, I washed the dishes while he dried them, the routine grounding and unremarkable. Outside, the sky dimmed into evening porch lights, blinking on down the street one by one. Later, I stepped out onto the back porch with a glass of water and leaned against the railing. The night air was cooler now, quieter. Somewhere nearby, a train horn sounded in the distance, low and steady. I thought about my family, not with anger, not with regret, but with clarity. The version of them I'd spent years protecting had relied on my silence more than my love. And once that silence ended, everything they'd built on it collapsed under its own weight. That wasn't revenge. That was gravity. My phone buzzed once more. A calendar alert confirming my next training cycle. I acknowledged it and slid the phone back into my pocket. Inside, my husband turned off the lights one by one, the house settling into its familiar nighttime stillness. I finished my water and stepped back inside, closing the door behind me. As I moved through the hallway, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same. No dramatic transformation, no visible scars. Just steadier. I hadn't destroyed my family. I hadn't taken anything from them that wasn't already mine. All I had done was stop absorbing the cost of their choices. And once I did that, everything else followed naturally. I used to believe family loyalty meant staying quiet, even when things felt wrong. But silence doesn't protect relationships. It only protects patterns. Walking away from that cycle didn't make me colder. It made me clearer. And clarity, it turns out, is what finally brings peace. If stories like this resonate with you, real family revenge stories, honest family drama moments, where quiet strength matters more than shouting, then you're not alone. These are the stories I share here. Not for shock value, but for truth. If you want more real-life stories like this, told straight, and without sugarcoating, subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming, and some of them hit closer to home than you might expect.